When we were looking through that massive stack of veterinary notes you sent us for today's deep dive, there was this one incredibly persistent myth that just kept jumping off the page.
Oh, right. The small dog assumption.
Yeah, exactly. It's this unspoken cultural idea that if you get a small companion breed, a dog that physically fits in your lap, like the Havanese, you are somehow automatically signing up for less work.
Right, because they aren't, out in the fields herding sheep or pulling a sled across the tundra or something.
Right. The assumption is that they just kind of exist on standby, like
Hmm.
a fuzzy, self-sustaining throw pillow.
Which is so funny because the sources completely dismantle that small equals simple assumption in like the first few pages.
They really do.
Yeah, what we were really looking at in these 9 distinct veterinary and lifestyle modules you provided is just the sheer volume of deliberate, invisible work that's required to keep a companion dog functionally healthy over a 15-year lifespan.
And I mean, that is our mission today. We're going to try to distill this absolute mountain of data into a cohesive lifetime roadmap tailored specifically for you, the listener.
Because the core theme running through your sources is really fascinating. It's this idea that a companion dog's primary drive, like their psychological need to be physical close to you, never really changes.
Right, from the day you bring them home at, what, 8 weeks old to their final senior years, they just want to be near you.
Exactly. But the actual care required to protect and maintain that closeness, that has to undergo a pretty radical evolution over time.
So to understand that evolution, we really have to look at how a dog is built psychologically and physically, from the ground up.
Yeah, the sources treat puppyhood not as this time to just sort of endure potty training, but as the critical window that sets the trajectory for the entire lifespan.
Okay, let's unpack this because the sources are so adamant that puppy care isn't just about, enjoying the absolute cuteness of a tiny, fluffy dog. It's really about building a resilient foundation.
It really is.
Think of it like pouring the concrete foundation for a house. If you only focus on the window treatments and the paint colors, the adorable puppy milestones, and you ignore the structural integrity underneath, the whole house is going to shift and crack a few years down the line.
Right, which means you have to establish a veterinary baseline early on. You have to track their growth curves meticulously and enforce child-safe handling rules from day one.
And crucially, you have to actively practice alone time, which, I mean, that's so hard, right?
Oh, practicing alone time is often the absolute hardest part for a new owner of a companion breed. I mean, these dogs are literally bred to be with you, so leaving them alone feels completely counterintuitive.
You feel like a monster walking out of the room.
You do. But if a dog never learns how to self-soothe in an empty room, their nervous system becomes entirely dependent on your physical presence for regulation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that leads directly to severe separation anxiety. So the structural integrity you mentioned, it's built by introducing small, manageable doses of stress and letting the puppy realize, oh, hey, I can actually survive this.
And that ties right into the physical handling too, right?
Yeah.
Because the sources emphasize starting incredibly early with what they call desensitization handling.
Right, exactly. Gently messing with their paws, checking inside their ears, and deliberately touching their gums and teeth.
But okay, looking at these tiny puppies, I have to ask about a very human impulse here.
Ah.
Since these dogs are so small, usually under 10 pounds in puppies, isn't it overwhelmingly tempting to just carry them through every scary situation?
Oh, absolutely.
Like if a giant golden retriever walks by or a loud truck drives past, the natural reflex is to just, scoop them up into your arms.
It is the natural reflex, but when you constantly swoop in and lift a small dog away from a novel or intimidating stimulus, you are essentially short-circuiting their ability to process the environment.
Yes.
Well, the canine nervous system needs to encounter something new, experience the initial spike in cortisol, investigate it, and then naturally return to a resting state. That arc is exactly how confidence is manufactured.
So by scooping them up, we just don't let them finish the arc.
Right, you freeze them in the panic phase. They never actually get to the realization of safety. Instead, the dog learns a very dangerous equation, which is that the ground is a place of inescapable terror, and your arms are the only location where survival is even possible.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, but it's so sad.
Yeah, socialization isn't just about maximizing friendliness so they wag their tail at every stranger. It's about teaching their nervous system how to encounter the unknown without a catastrophic failure.
We think we are protecting them, but we are literally engineering an anxious adult dog who lacks the coping mechanisms to just exist on their own 4 feet.
Exactly. The overarching goal of the puppy phase is a confident future companion. If they can't navigate the floor of their own neighborhood, that foundational concrete you talked about has already cracked.
Okay, so let's say you successfully navigate that phase. You build a confident puppy, their paws stay on the ground, they aren't terrified of the mail carrier. Once that dog reaches adulthood, the sources point out a completely different, almost silent threat.
Complacency.
Yes, complacency. The chaotic puppy milestones are over, the dog seems perfectly healthy, and you just kind of settle into a groove.
Right, you relax.
Yeah. So how do you maintain a baseline of health when there are no immediate crises forcing you to pay attention?
Well, adulthood is the longest stretch of the dog's life, and it is entirely governed by routine. And routines either solidify into protective architecture or they quietly degrade.
Because you aren't rushing to the vet for puppy vaccines every 3 weeks anymore.
Exactly. So things like measuring daily food intake can easily slip into just tossing a casual scoop of kibble into the bowl. But diet and weight have to be monitored with, mathematical precision.
Mathematical precision.
Yes, because meals, treats, training rewards, and even those little table scraps all contribute to a caloric bottom line that small bodies just process very differently than large ones.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting in the notes you provided. The sources highlight this concept of the fluff factor.
Oh, the fluff factor's huge.
Yeah, you actually have to check Havanese's weight and body condition by hand.
Yeah.
Like you have to physically feel for their ribs and spine because their coat acts as this crazy optical illusion.
Yeah, the Havanese has this dense, voluminous double coat. It stands off the skin, which creates a permanent silhouette that really doesn't change even if the dog loses or gains a significant amount of underlying mass.
Which is wild to think about. Like, if a 10-pound dog gains 2 pounds, that is a 20% increase in their total body weight.
Which is massive for them.
If a human did that, you'd notice immediately. But because of the coat, your eyes will completely deceive you. A dog can be dangerously overweight, stressing their joints, or rapidly losing muscle mass due to some underlying illness, and they look exactly the same walking across your living room.
And that's why this physical characteristic of the breed demands a highly tactile awareness from the owner. You cannot manage their health visually.
You just can't.
No, you have to get your hands through the hair and down to the skin on a regular basis,
Yeah.
which fundamentally reframes the whole purpose of grooming.
Right, so brushing them isn't just about keeping them looking like a pristine show dog. The sources treat grooming as this essential, non-negotiable health check.
Grooming is a diagnostic tool. When you are systematically brushing through the coat, feeling for mats or tangles, you are essentially acting as the frontline observer for the dog's physical state.
You're checking for things.
Exactly. You are checking for abnormal heat in the joints, maybe new lumps under the skin, changes in the paw pad texture, and checking the length of the nails. A beautiful, well-maintained coat should just never serve as a hiding place for physical discomfort.
Basically, you are gathering health information months before a problem becomes obvious enough to, prompt a sudden vet visit.
And if you find a mat pulling tightly against the skin, that is a constant source of low-grade pain for the dog. Regular grooming eliminates those microstressors entirely.
Speaking of hidden discomfort, the deep dive takes a major turn here. We move from the skin and coat to a much more critical area that impacts literally everything else in the dog's life.
The mouth.
The mouth. The sources hammer this home with incredible urgency. Dental care is the single strongest priority for this breed.
It really is. Dental health is like a lifetime conflict system running underneath the dog's entire physiological and behavioral profile.
And there is a deeply ingrained misconception in the pet world, right? That feeding dry kibble acts as a natural mechanical toothbrush.
Oh yeah, the kibble myth. The theory is that the hard pieces scrape plaque off the teeth as the dog chews.
But the sources dismantle that entirely. They explain that most dogs don't even chew kibble thoroughly, like they just swallow it whole.
Yeah.
And when they do bite down, kibble just shatters into this carbohydrate-heavy dust that actually sticks to the gum line and feeds the bacteria that cause periodontal disease.
Exactly.
It would be like a human eating pretzels and claiming it was cleaning their teeth.
That's a great analogy. Dry food alone is simply not a dental plan. The sources actually require a two-pronged approach. You need daily mechanical toothbrushing by the owner and professional anesthetized veterinary dental exams.
Wow, daily.
Daily. Small breeds have the exact same number of adult teeth as a large breed, 42 teeth, but they are crowded into a tiny little jaw.
So there's just no room.
Right, that crowding creates countless pockets for bacteria to thrive. And that leads to rapid decay, bone loss, and systemic infection that can actually eventually damage the heart and kidneys.
And the pain, I mean, the dental pain ripples out into their daily lives in ways we might completely misinterpret. It obviously causes them to drop their food out of the bowl or drool excessively or suddenly refuse to eat hard treats.
Right.
But the connection the sources make between dental health and behavior is what really made me stop and think. So let me pose a scenario to you.
Sure.
If my perfectly sweet, well-adjusted adult Havanese suddenly starts snapping at my hand when I go to brush their ears, or just starts randomly barking at a blank wall in the hallway, the natural human assumption is that they are being stubborn or going through some weird behavioral phase, right?
Like most people think, yeah.
But the sources suggest something else entirely.
They do, and it requires a fundamental shift in how we interpret animal behavior. A sudden change in behavior is almost never a random personality shift. It is a symptom of physical reality.
Interesting.
Dogs are absolute masters of masking chronic pain. It's an evolutionary trait to avoid appearing vulnerable, but when the pain overwhelms their ability to mask it, it leaks out as behavior.
How does a toothache translate into barking at a wall, though? I think that's the mechanism that feels so disconnected to a normal owner.
Right, it comes down to referred pain and sensory overload. The nerves in a dog's jaw, specifically the trigeminal nerve, are intimately connected to the cranial nerves running throughout their entire head.
Okay.
So a severe throbbing tooth abscess doesn't always just hurt in the mouth. It can manifest as a sharp shooting pain behind the eyes or a deep pressure in the ear canal. The dog doesn't possess the cognitive ability to understand, oh, I have an infection in my premolar.
Right, they can't rationalize it.
Exactly. They just experience a sudden, terrifying sensory spike.
So they are standing in a quiet hallway. They experience a sudden jolt of intense pain, and because they don't know it's coming from inside their own head, they assume there's a threat in the environment. So they bark at the wall.
Exactly. Or in the case of snapping, when you try to brush them, their nervous system is already operating at maximum capacity, just dealing with the chronic background pain of a rotting tooth. So when you add the new stimulus of a brush, their system overloads. They literally don't have the bandwidth to process the touch, so they react defensively. Any sudden onset of grumpiness, new anxiety, or behavioral regression demands a hard pause and a thorough veterinary workup.
Because they can't text us and say, hey, my back left molar is killing me, so their behavior becomes their language.
Yes, exactly.
And this connection between physical comfort and behavior becomes the absolute center of gravity as the dog leaves adulthood and enters the senior years.
Right. As hidden physical issues naturally become more common with age, the entire approach to care has to shift from maintenance to adaptation.
The dog's personality, their core drive to be right next to you, remains entirely intact.
Yes.
But the physical world simply gets harder for them to navigate.
And that's why treating aging isn't a medical battle to turn back the clock. It's really an environmental design challenge.
I love that concept from the sources. Accessibility architecture for our pets. We aren't trying to, quote-unquote, fix the aging dog. We are altering the physical house around them to protect their dignity.
Right, because a Havanese fits beautifully into small homes and apartments, but those spaces still contain obstacles for an aging body.
Like what?
Well, it means bringing in ramps for the sofa or the bed so they don't have to absorb the concussive force of jumping down on stiff joints. It means putting non-slip rugs over slick hardwood floors so a dog who is losing muscle mass in their hindquarters doesn't have to constantly struggle for traction.
It also changes how we exercise them, right?
Yeah.
Shorter walks where the focus isn't on physical endurance, but on mental stimulation.
Yes.
Like letting them spend 10 minutes just sniffing a single patch of grass.
Yes. Sniffing processes massive amounts of information for a dog, and it actually tires out their brain without stressing their arthritic hips.
And we must adapt our physical handling too. Grooming sessions need to become shorter and far more gentle, recognizing that holding a leg in an awkward position for 10 minutes to brush out a tangle might now be excruciating for them.
Exactly. Furthermore, owners must monitor appetite and muscle loss meticulously during this phase because an older dog's weight can trend dangerously in either direction depending on their metabolic changes.
The sources also dig into the cognitive and sensory changes, doggy dementia, vision loss, hearing decline, and probably the most emotionally difficult part for many owners, house training regression.
That is a tough one. But if a previously reliable dog suddenly begins having accidents inside the house, It is vital to respond with deep compassion rather than punishment.
Because they aren't doing it on purpose.
Right. They aren't being spiteful, and they haven't just forgotten their training. They may be suffering from a urinary tract infection, or their sphincter muscles are weakening, or cognitive decline has literally caused them to forget how to signal that they need to go outside.
Punishing a senior dog for a bodily function they can no longer control is just heartbreaking. It's an aging body failing, not a sudden loss of obedience.
Exactly.
The sources make a brilliant distinction here. Aging is a natural, unstoppable process, but pain is a medical condition. You can't cure getting old, but you should never dismiss a dog's reluctance to climb stairs or their newfound trembling as, quote-unquote, just getting old.
Pain management in senior dogs is highly advanced now. Quality of life, meaning their physical comfort, the preservation of their dignity, and their emotional security, is the question sitting quietly behind every single decision you make in their final years.
So if we look at this entire roadmap, from building the puppy foundation to checking the adult fluff factor, to interpreting behavioral changes, to adapting the senior environment, how do you actually manage all of this without losing your mind?
Good
I
question.
mean, you can't just rely on a hunch that your dog feels lighter or a vague memory of when they last threw up. You need objective data. And that brings us to the owner's toolbox.
The sources heavily advocate for keeping strict, centralized records. They specifically highlight using tracking ecosystems, like the Vital Pet tool mentioned in your notes.
Right.
And this isn't just about keeping a messy folder of old vaccine receipts in a drawer. It is about actively logging daily metrics.
What does a tool like Vital Pet actually do in practice? Because for a lot of people, adding another app or journal to their daily routine sounds exhausting.
Think of it as a bridge between your daily observations and the veterinarian's diagnostic capabilities. When you look at a dog every single day, slow, incremental changes become entirely invisible to you.
Like the fluff factor we talked about.
Exactly. You might not notice that a dog has lost a pound over 6 months, or that they have been drinking slightly more water every week for a year.
But a pound on a Havanese is massive.
Exactly, but the daily visual change is zero. By logging their exact weight in ounces every month, tracking the specific grams of food they consume, noting stool consistency, and logging the dates of any vomiting or mild limping, you build a baseline of objective truth.
There's a quote from the sources that sums this up perfectly. Memory is emotional, records are useful. When your dog is sick and you are sitting in the vet clinic feeling anxious and terrified, your memory is completely unreliable.
Completely.
The vet asks, when did the limping start? And you say, I don't know, a few days ago.
But if you open your records, you can say, the limping started Tuesday evening after a longer than usual walk, and it correlated with a 10% drop in appetite on Wednesday, though her water intake remained normal.
Wow, yeah.
That level of precise data completely changes the diagnostic process. It creates a true partnership with your veterinarian because you are bringing them actionable patterns, not just scattered anxiety.
Keeping a logbook literally takes the panic out of the process. It allows you to step back and look at the math of their health. And the flip side of that data collection is knowing what actually constitutes a true drop-everything emergency, so you aren't panicking daily over a single sneeze or a weird nap schedule.
Right. Knowing the absolute red flags gives you the psychological freedom to relax. The sources list the urgent warning signs really clearly.
Like sustained difficulty breathing.
Yes, sustained difficulty breathing, any form of collapse or fainting, pale or blue gums, which indicate a lack of oxygen or internal bleeding, bloody stool, a sudden inability to use their hind legs, or severe, uncharacteristic lethargy where they just won't lift their head.
If you know those specific extremes, define the boundary lines of safety. It allows that invisible architecture of your daily routine to just run quietly in the background. You don't have to be on high alert every second because you know exactly what a real emergency looks like.
Lifetime health isn't about grand, heroic interventions. It is built in the quiet, mundane moments. It is thousands of small routines, measuring the food, brushing the teeth, checking the paw pads, writing down the weight, done with consistent care over 15 years.
Okay, let's bring this all together. The ultimate takeaway from this massive stack of sources you provided is that a breed like the Havanese gives you their closeness, their humor, and their companionship incredibly freely. It is in their DNA.
There really is.
But protecting that closeness is an active, evolving responsibility. It's looking past the shiny paint of puppyhood to build a resilient nervous system. It's checking the body condition beneath the deceptive fluff. It's understanding that a sudden snap of the teeth might actually be a cry for help regarding a rotten molar. And it's altering your living room to protect their aging joints.
And even if someone listening doesn't own a Havanese, or any dog at all for that matter, the framework laid out in these sources is profound.
Yeah.
Learning to observe a dependent creature closely, adapting environments to support their shifting physical needs, and separating your own emotional memory from useful, objective data, that is a masterclass in the art of caregiving.
It really is. And looking through all this data, it leaves me with a thought that wasn't explicitly written in the veterinary text today, but feels so intensely relevant to how we live our own lives.
Ooh.
Yeah, if we're willing to be this meticulous about tracking a dog's daily routines, their hidden weight fluctuations, and their subtle behavioral signs of underlying discomfort, um, why do we so often ignore our own baseline health changes?
Wow. Yeah. We tolerate a lot of our own check engine lights, don't we?
We do.
Oh,
What if we applied that incredible principle, memory is emotional, records are useful, to our own human bodies?
that's a great point.
Instead of waiting until our own stress, chronic pain, or exhaustion becomes a five-alarm emergency, what if we track our own baseline data and adapted our own environments with that exact same level of compassion? It's just something to think about the next time you are brushing your dog's teeth while ignoring your own persistent headache.
That is a deeply important question to leave on. And as a final note on today's materials, this deep dive is intended for educational purposes only. If you are ever concerned about your dog's physical health or behavioral changes, always consult your veterinarian directly.
Thank you for sharing these sources with us and for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you see a tiny, fluffy dog resting comfortably in someone's lap, you'll know that peace isn't just happening by accident. You'll know all about the structural foundation, the invisible daily routines, and the meticulous data tracking hiding underneath that shiny coat. Keep exploring, keep tracking your baselines, and we'll see you next time.